Hey guys, it's Mr. Shumpert. Today we're going to be talking about the 13 English colonies. Our objectives for today are to know the difference between colonizing and exploring. We also need to know facts about the colonial regions and know the purposes behind self-government and the reasons the colonists wanted it. So why would you leave your home in England to colonize the New World? First, we need to talk about the difference between colonization and exploration. When you explore a region, all you're doing is moving through a region quickly, using the natural resources, using the raw materials, and not worrying about the aftermath. You use them until they are depleted, and then you move on. When you colonize a place, you try to stay there permanently. You try to use what's there and make more if possible. This is a permanent settlement. Now, the English had several reasons why they wanted to colonize this new world. They were looking for religious freedom. They wanted political freedom from their king. They thought it was a great economic opportunity. And they thought it was a better life here than they had in England. Let's talk about Jamestown. This was the first successful permanent English settlement. They had tried previously with Roanoke, but Jamestown was the first successful one. They established this in 1607, and they gained success by growing tobacco. Let's talk about Plymouth. When the Mayflower landed at Plymouth, it was by accident. And the English settlers aboard had to create a form of government. Well, they wanted to. And they did this before they even left the boat. They created the first form of self-government. They were too far from England, and they had no one else to govern them. This document that they created was called the Mayflower Compact, and it was signed in 1620. The men signed it and agreed to make decisions and laws together in a majority rules basis. Let's begin with the New England colonies. These are the northernmost colonies of the New World. They had cold, long winters with pretty poor soil. They had some good ports, with Boston being one of them, that they would use for trade. And they would trade their raw materials, they would trade their logs, they would trade their fish, and they would build ships as well. They did have small subsistence farms that were only used by families for the family. They would not sell these crops. Now, life in the New England colonies centered around religion. Only the church members could vote. They didn't have much tolerance for anyone else if you were not a Puritan or a Pilgrim. Religious groups established the first self-governments here, where only the church members could vote. And they used town meetings to make all their decisions, which is similar to a two-house legislature. Now, the population density in New England was very high because people lived close together in towns. What about the middle colonies? They have rich soil, deep rivers, and natural ports that are great for trade. They have large farms, and they're known as the breadbasket because of the wheat and the grain that are grown here. They have logging and fishing and shipbuilding, and they have two of the largest cities in the colonies, Philadelphia being the largest and New York is the second. And here in the middle colonies, they are more tolerant of religions, more so than the New England colonies. Because of the Quakers, they were established in Pennsylvania by William Penn. And now the southern colonies. They have good, rich soil and a warm climate. Two factors that are great for growing cash crops. And that's what they did. They had plantations. But they needed slaves to make these plantations profitable. And the transatlantic slave trade supplied those plantations with labor. The routes were known as the Triangle Trade Route because of the triangular route taken to the three destinations. They would begin in England and travel south to Africa, pick up the slaves and travel west to the new colonies, and then take the profits and materials back to England. They were diverse in religion. The Catholics dominated Maryland. But people came to the southern colonies to make money, not really for religious freedoms. So because of this, there were still a lot of members of the Church of England in the southern colonies. And here the population density is low because people were spread out on large plantations. Let's talk about the establishment of self-government in the colonies. Religious freedom was the main cause for the establishment of the 13 colonies, with the Pilgrims, Puritans, and Quakers all creating communities that were self-government. They did this because the king treated them badly, and they wanted to experiment with a new type of government, different from the King of England. So how did England influence self-government in the colonies? Well, it began with the Magna Carta, which is a document that limits the king's power. And then the English Bill of Rights came along. This was a document which gave individual rights to English citizens, and this later influenced our Bill of Rights. Now, England's Congress, which is called Parliament, makes the laws. And this influenced our Virginia House of Burgesses and eventually what we call the U.S. Congress. Now, the king's abuse of power made colonists want a different type of leader. They didn't want a monarch anymore. They wanted someone with less power. And then the distance between England and the colonies was so far, the colonists were really forced to govern themselves. Now, town hall meetings were what the New England colonies used. This is where the men came to meet together and make decisions for the colonies. This is kind of like a democracy. And the Mayflower Compact of 1620, it was the first self-government in the colonies. The Virginia House of Burgesses was the first representative assembly in the colonies. It was modeled after Parliament. And then the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut was the first written constitution in the colonies. This allowed colonists to elect judges, a governor, and a legislature. It allowed for non-church members to vote, which was a separation of church and state. Remember our objectives. We need to know the difference between colonizing and exploring. We need to know facts about the colonial regions. And we also need to know the purposes behind self-government and the reasons the colonists wanted it. If you can't answer these, or you don't know, you'll need to go back and watch this video. We'll see you around, guys.